people started thinking like I was like this big mean asshole or something, like who would like flip out on you or something. It really wasn't like that at all.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was the Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, did you know that the national suicide number is just now 988? There's a very small part in the interview where Alex talks about how they used to have a hotline in their old Eyeball releases. And I bring up that this number exists, so I don't really know if anyone out there really needs this number, but you never know that if someone's listening does. So again, it's 988. If you need to call it, definitely do. This definitely is a pretty hardcore way to start this episode, but hopefully this is helpful. Eyeball Records is an independent record label originally established in New York City out of apartment 4C on 14th Street at Avenue A. The label later moved to Kearny, New Jersey, and they've released albums by artists such as H2O, Thursday, My Chemical Romance, Humble Beginnings, Pency Prep, and Murder by Death. In 2020, the label began releasing exclusive cassette and t-shirt bundles exclusively through the Hive, HYV. To me, it says Hive, so I'm just going to go with that. The first time I heard about Eyeball was when Humble Beginnings released their EP on the label in like 99. Fun fact, that EP is now on I Surrender Records, which is Rob Hitt's label, who's in Midtown, who's playing with My Chemical Romance this fall/winter. All that's pretty cool to me, so if you want to hear that EP, just go to Spotify and type in Humble Beginnings, and there you go. I don't remember meeting Alex back in the day, but we both agreed that we probably were at similar shows at the same time together back then. And he's always been this kind of mystery to me of who this guy was, so it was really cool to talk to him and like tell him that too. And this interview came out really fucking good, so I'm pretty stoked on that. So I reached out to him, asked him to be on the podcast. He agreed, and this is what we chat about. Eyeball starting back up, internal fuck-ups on some releases, recording at the studio where Tupac was shot, getting help from Greg Go-Kart Records, the Eyeball House, how the H2O release was funded, the aggressive lore that surrounds him, Humble Beginnings, becoming homeless, his relationship with Warner Brothers, Gaslight Anthem record that never saw the light of day, and a ton more. Go check out their website to see the newest releases that they have at eyeballrecords.org. And if you want to follow my Instagram, I'm doing a lot of reels, and I do teasers before each episode, and just try to post some fun stuff here and there. Just go to Instagram and look up This Was the Scene. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. So I have to confess, I was literally at the gym. I was on the treadmill. I just started just like kind of walking, and I put like a song on, and all of a sudden my phone pops up. It's like, you have a podcast interview in 10 minutes. And I was like, fuck, I thought it was at 2. I literally just walked in the gym. I was on the thing for about 2 minutes. The notification pops. I ran out, got in my vehicle, and just drove home and made it right on time.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I totally would have pushed it back for you.
No, this is totally fine. I just thought I thought we had said like 1 or 2, which I think we had kind of talked about, and literally made it home like within like a minute prior to this. So I was like, that's fine.
Well, thanks for doing that.
I wasn't going to tell you at 11 o'clock, like, hey, by the way, we need to like put this off because that's just rude.
I'm kind of used to things like that anyway, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, I don't want to bring you back to, I mean, the label's still going on, right?
Yeah, we stopped for a few years. I needed a break, quite honestly. Now we've been doing it again since the beginning of the pandemic. Yeah, we were kind of laughing to ourselves. We're like, started doing it again with 2 buddies of mine, this guy named Zach Nadilli, who used to actually work at Eyeball, and then this guy Adam Weiss, who has this production company called Ham on Everything out in LA. So those 2 guys are in LA, and I'm in Atlanta now. We got each coast covered, but it's more of a Eyeball in its current state is more of a experiment in philanthropy, even more so than it was in the early 2000s.
What do you mean? What's that mean?
We're hitting a loss for almost everything we put out, but, not a terrible loss. We're just trying to teach younger people how to do things properly. I just kind of want to be there to tutor and mentor some of these younger artists. It's nice to be able to do Eyeball again and not be like, all right, this is my job. I need to make this much money to be able to live, and having to have to deal with all of that. So now it's kind of like we do projects that we believe in. We just hope for the best, and if it doesn't work out, we try again.
I was looking at I'm on your website right now, and the one thing that stood out was this Shard 3.5 disc,
Oh, the floppy disk.
floppy disk. And Blake, what the fuck? Does that hold the album on it or something? Or
No, it's like B-sides and it's super, super compressed to fit everything on there. But it's cool. It's like all bitmappy, like imagery, and the music itself sounds like super compressed and kind of distorted. I think we made 50 of them just kind of for a joke to see if they would move and if people would be into it. And believe it or not, they really were.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, me either. It was a pretty cool idea.
How did that come about? And we'll jump back in the early days of Eyeball and starting about this since we're here. I want to talk about it.
We were kind of goofing on like dead formats and how cassettes are doing so well now, and who would have ever thought that cassettes would do well.
Yeah.
So we're like, yo, how ridiculous would it be if we did put this out on a floppy disk talking about dead formats. And we did, and kids actually got stoked on it. So we'll probably make more. I'm not sure.
What's like the age range now that's following you guys?
Between like 16 and early 20s. So that's kind of the biggest reason why I wanted to do this with other people, is because, I'm in my 40s now, and I don't know what a 16-year-old kid, 25-year-old kid, 22, I don't know what they listen to. It's not my scene anymore. I needed to get somebody that was more in touch with the younger audience and the younger artists, which is where Adam Weiss came into hand, because he's like, he knows everybody. He's one of those guys. I basically just put the signing the artists and working with the artists directly with him. And then what happens is after he chooses what he wants to work on, he brings it to Zach and I, and we either yay or nay it. It's great to have Adam there because I had my time already. And, I knew what bands I liked in the early 2000s, mid to late 90s. And that's the bands that I would sign and work with. Being my age now, like, let's be self-aware here. Like, I don't know what the fuck these kids really listen to, and I shouldn't know. It's not my scene. It's not my time. I had my time. It's time to give these younger kids a chance to create their own scene. So I'd like to be able to kind of be like the Yoda to that, to try to help them a little bit.
That's cool. I mean, it's funny because I'm looking at the roster now of the old bands, which we'll get into, and it seemed like you had a really good year. Because, I mean, you had My Chem, Thursday, Gaslight Anthem, fucking... With who else we got here? I want to talk about the Humble Beginnings EP, definitely.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I totally want to talk about that shit.
Yeah, dude, I love that record.
I know, it's so good. It still holds up, like, to this day.
It does. I listened to it, like, I just moved out to Atlanta recently, but on the drive down, I listened to the Humble EP for the first time in, like, a year. But I revisit it every year at least a couple times.
I mean, because now Rob Hitt owns it. He is I Surrender.
Yeah, well, what happened was, Rob called me. I love Rob. Rob's a great dude. He got in touch with me and was like, listen, I know that you're taking a break from Eyeball. Like, what happened was, like, I went on what I called the radical sabbatical, where I just traveled around for a few years and bounced around, kind of just got my brain back together, because doing the label really burnt me out, man, quite honestly. Really, really bad. But it was the best time of my life. Don't get me wrong. But I was just tired. Rob called and said, would you be cool if we did the Humble EP through, my label, I Surrender? I wasn't doing Eyeball yet again, and then I was just kind of sitting on those records. I kind of have this deal where if a band comes to me that I've worked with and they're not happy with the fact that we still have their record, or they want to do the record themselves or anything like that, and it's been a few years, I give it back to them. I don't hold on to people's masters forever like that. Because I don't think it's our job to be able to do that. I think that the artist should be able to own their life. I gave them that record, and then also the Midtown EP that came out on Eyeball, the re-release of Pinball Jays.
Yeah.
Rob Hitt put that out too, actually.
It's funny you said the beginning of the pandemic is when you started doing all the... Actually, no, because I'm getting my years mixed up. He did that in 2018, because when I started the podcast... really quickly, Rob hit me up to put out the Lanemeyer EP, and then he got the Humble one, because then we played a show in Jersey, in Teaneck.
Yeah, I was living in Denver at the time, and I couldn't get to it. I was so bummed.
Oh, man. I think I did hear that.
So bummed, man. I really, really wanted to be there for that. And I played phone tag with Gabe for a bit, and I tried to get in touch with Gabe, and Gabe is a difficult man to pin down these days. Rob's a lot easier to talk to.
Yeah, anytime me and Rob were getting on the phone back then, we'd be talking for 2 hours. He'd be like, "Hey, you got a minute?" And then 2 hours later, I was like, "Jesus Christ, dude! Like, we really talk a lot."
Yeah, that's cool.
So, all right, man. So there's a lot. I want to like jump into all this stuff. I think as we do the whole timeline, we will. So let's kind of I'll guide this, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Navigate.
I'll navigate this. There we go. I'm gonna navigate this like I normally do, and we'll start off with how did you get involved in the scene?
Sure. In the early 90s, me with me, tons of other kids discovered CBGB's matinees on Sundays and ABC No Rio matinees on Saturdays. That was like basically my life for years, was going to those shows on the weekends. Well, I grew up in Jersey City. At the time, we started the label in New York City on Avenue A and 14th Street. We were considered a New York label back then, back in 95 when we started. And the first record I put out was this band, was The Casualties. It was The Casualties' first record. Me getting involved in the scene was basically, going to these shows all the time and just being kind of a fixture until, I got the courage to like make more friends within that community. Because when you're a 13-year-old kid sneaking into CBGB's, you kind of stay quiet in the corner a little bit, especially if it's not, when you're not comfortable with what's going around you yet. But yeah, that's basically my introduction. Like my first favorite bands were like almost every other person my age's favorite bands they're from New Jersey, like the Misfits, Gorilla Biscuits. I love that stuff. Completely opposite kind of bands. But in 1989, 1990, when you're getting into all this stuff, it's all just different.
How old were you when you started the label?
I was 17.
Did you kind of have a natural business sense, or did you just love bands so much that you're like, people need to see this, so I'm gonna do something to get them to be known?
That was more so the reasoning. I didn't know anything about running a business. However, I did know that there were tons of bands all around me that were getting zero attention. At that time, there were great labels in New York, but they weren't really focusing on what was happening in New York at that time. They were chasing other artists from other parts of the country. And then, of course, California was like the big music state at that time. So all those labels and bands were getting the attention on the West Coast, while on the East Coast and the Northeast especially, we had so many great bands going on that we all paid attention to, but it seemed like nobody outside of that room were. So I took it as an opportunity of being like, well, we got to get these bands heard and make a mark on what we're doing here, because I felt like nobody was actually going in and paying attention enough and caring enough to actually be there and keep track of the history of what was happening.
What was the learning curves that you hit the first year or two with starting the label?
I learned that, let's see, that's a really good question. I learned. I made a lot of mistakes.
We'll talk about them. Like, just talk about, all this one instance, we got the CDs and there was, the artwork was wrong or shit like that.
Oh, one time we got 1,000 CDs back and they were completely like all misspelled. All the titles were misspelled. Like there was all these errors on it, and they were already completely packaged and sealed. That was like a gazillion-dollar mistake on my part at that time. And I trusted the graphic artist, a friend of mine that was doing it, to autocorrect at least, but he did not. So that's one thing that happened. I mean, there was another time where there was a digital glitch on a whole pressing of 10,000 CDs that somehow between us mastering and it going to the plant, one of the files must have corrupted. So we did 10,000 CDs, and we caught the glitch right after they shrink wrapped them. So that was a huge accident. So we had to reopen all the digipacks and by hand put in the new CD. So that really sucked.
Jesus Christ.
And then it's like learning how to deal with distributors and learning how to get ripped off by distributors. Learning that just because somebody's running a DIY distro doesn't mean that they're going to pay you or even pay attention to you when you're trying to invoice them later.
That's come up a couple times. That distro just sounds like they suck.
Oh man, honestly, if it wasn't for the distribution end of this business, I don't think I would have gotten as burnt out as I did. Dealing with them was just it was difficult. And like I said, I really loved my life during it. I enjoyed everything I did, but there's just some people and sometimes that make things more difficult for you. And dealing with distributors is just, especially towards the end for us. But in the beginning, it's hard to even just find anyone to pay attention to you to distro. And our first bigger distributor was Caroline. We still went through all this, all the DIY guys that were doing it, like Temperance Distribution. I don't know if you remember them. They were from like South Jersey, like Atlantic City area. They went under and owed us a ton of money. Another guy who is awesome as a person, I like him a lot. I'm not going to name him, but he had a distro that went under a few years back, a while back now. But he was big. He had a label on a distro, and he owed me like 15, 20 grand, and just kind of like walked on it. And I was like, dude, that's like that's like almost all the money I make in a year at this point. Just because they didn't pay us doesn't mean that I don't have to pay that band. So I still have to pay that artist on those records that are gone because that's just the way it is, even though I'm not getting paid for them.
So kind of going back to that question about the lessons learned the first year. So you start this, and your first record you said was the Casualties.
Yeah, first record was the Casualties.
So what did you learn from doing that? Because the process, the step by step would sound like you sign the band, they record it, so then it's okay, who pays for that? Then you got a master who pays for that. Then you got to get artwork, and then you got to get it pressed. So what was that whole process for you when you're like, holy shit, what is this stuff I need to do?
Well, what we did was a friend of a friend was engineering at this place called Quad Studios in New York. And Quad Studios is actually where Tupac got shot while recording.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so it's like this really fancy studio, right? And this dude gave us a deal to record if we started at midnight and ended at like 8 a.m. or something like that, or no, at 10 a.m. So from midnight to 10 a.m., we got this like super good price to do the Casualties record. So we snuck in there and did that and recorded. It was wild. It was like the 30-something floor of this huge building, and it was like a place where you'd not expect to see people that looked like the Casualties. So I guess that's maybe another reasons why they had us there in the middle of the night. And we were just fucking kids. So like, man, we were throwing these huge water jugs, like, like from the water coolers. We were throwing them out the window off like the 40-something floor and just having them explode when they hit the ground. And because it was Manhattan in the middle of the night, like everything would echo. It sounded like a freaking bomb. But so we were just acting like, 17, 18-year-old kids. Although George from the Casualties was probably about 140 at that time. but we were all kids. So, that was like that was my first hands-on with another band that I wasn't actually part of to record in the recording process. And then from there, we had to learn how to do, how to get things printed, how to get things pressed, how to master, everything that comes with it. And actually, somebody that helped us a lot was Greg from Go-Kart Records, was one of the buddies of mine that we would call, and also Charles from Gurn Blandstead, who also sang in Rorschach. He was another great guy to call. He's a Paramus Jersey dude. He put out the Weston records. I don't know if you remember those ones.
The original ones, like the
Yeah, got beat up and all that or whatever it was. Yeah.
Well, Greg put those out on Go-Kart.
Yeah, Greg put those out. Greg, and then Charles had, as far as I remember, I could be remembering it correctly. I remember Charles put out Weston prior to Greg.
That was the Teenage something with the elephant song.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Because I talked to Chuck from Weston, and he was talking about that whole era. I mean, Weston always comes up in so many interviews because they were just such like the band that everyone loved.
And it doesn't matter like what kind of music that person was into or is into now. Even like I know so many people that just love those Weston records.
Oh yeah, yeah. They were just like so different.
Yeah, exactly. They were fun as shit, and they were like one of those bands that could fit on any bill. They could fit on a more aggressive bill or a more melodic bill. It didn't matter. They were just there. They were like them and Plow United. I really like.
Yeah, Plow is like one of those bands where when they like went away, you're like, why?
Yeah, right, exactly.
So when you're doing the label the first year, what was like the things that you loved and the things you hated?
I loved working with the bands. I loved walking into record shops trying to get them to buy our stuff or at least consign it. Like I like trying to spread the word, like guerrilla style. I really enjoyed the hustle of that. And at the time, we were really good friends with Chris that owned Generation Records on Thompson Street in Manhattan. Vinny, my partner that started the label with me, was the manager and buyer for Generation. So we actually, Chris that owned Generation is a fucking awesome guy. And what he did was he loaned us the money to do like to press the casualties. He loaned us the money to press H2O. He loaned us the money to press LES Stitches. He loaned us the money to press a lot of our stuff. But the deal was, since they were like the punk rock record store of New York, we would give him a month exclusive of the title so that he would have the month to sell it. And then after that month, we would sell it to the distros.
So his store would be the only spot you can get the record for a month.
Exactly, for like the first month, sometimes 2 months even.
That's pretty genius.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, I was just a kid, so pressing, $1,500 pressing might as well have been $50,000, at that time. Chris would help us, and it really became very, very community very fast. And people were just really, really into helping and being part of it. I guess they felt there was something special going on, and luckily for me, I had a lot of help.
What was like the day to day for you guys? Did you guys have an office? And
For years, like I said, we started Eyeball in Manhattan, in the Lower East Side, and then Vinny left. He didn't want to do it anymore after a few years. Just really early on, he left. I moved the label from Manhattan to Kearny, New Jersey, which is in Hudson County. It's basically between Jersey City and Newark.
that's basically where the pipeline was, right?
Well, Pipeline was in Newark, but it's not too far from there at all. Maybe like 20 minutes. So I moved it there, and what we did was we had a house on the main strip there. So like the first floor was an architect office with this dude that was awesome, who never ever fucking complained about anything, and he could have because we were wild. But that was the Eyeball House, and at the Eyeball House, we had it's set up for any bands that are touring through to crash, and we would feed everybody, and we had an office there as well, and that's where we ran Eyeball out of for years until we signed our Warner deal, and then we got a real office and a real employee list and 401ks and full insurance and all that stuff, and we did that for about 5 years until I got burnt out.
So going back to the beginning before all that stuff happens, when you were doing releases, were they selling or were any of them kind of duds?
There were some duds, but there were also some records that were like flying. Like back then, the Casualties record was killing it. They were doing really, really well, and it was the only release they had out that was available to anybody because we were the first label to do anything with them. The H2O record was flying around for years. We did really well with that one. Again, and that's an early release I think it was like our fourth or sixth release. I can't remember. I could be wrong. And then we released LES Stitches. That was the first full length that we did on Eyeball. First full length that came out on CD and everything like that. Another label called NG Records came along and was like, "We'll give you $10,000 for that Stitches record." And I said, "We just put it out. I don't know if that's a wise move for us." And I went to the band, and the band was like, "We really want to be on that label, and they're a bigger label than you." So I was like, "All right, well, if that's what you guys want, I'll take the $10,000 and put it back into Eyeball, and you guys can go live on a new label and be happy." And we're still friends. Like I still actually to this day, it's funny. Like that record came out in the '90s. And I still every once in a while I'll talk to those guys still. So it's funny how those old friendships still sticking around.
Especially after they left your label, so it's pretty big to not like hold a grudge for that.
Well, I couldn't hold a grudge for it because they felt like it was a smart move for their careers, and quite honestly, like who the fuck am I to hold anyone back? Like I'm just some dude doing a record label. Like I don't, I can't control what you guys are doing and what your wants and desires are and what your goals are. So if I'm standing in the way of somebody's goal and it's an issue, I don't ever want to be that person to anybody. So, and also I got 10 grand. I was like 18 years old. 10 grand at 18 is like like you're rich. So yeah, like I was like, all right, whatever. Everything worked out cool, and I had no animosity towards them. At first your feelings get hurt a little bit, and that's another lesson I had to learn very quickly about the label is that artists are a very specific breed, and
Yeah.
and I'm an artist as well. However, I never brought my art to the level of the bands that we were releasing. I learned that like you really got to sometimes watch how you word things with artists because you don't want to hurt their feelings and you don't want to piss them off and you don't it's almost like some artists you have to deal with like straight up kid gloves. So I learned that pretty quickly as well, and I learned that when they freak out on you, they're probably just uncomfortable, and just give them a little while and then come back to it and be like, hey man, is everything okay? Like I didn't mean to upset you or anything like that.
That's a really good point. Like the uncomfortable thing, it makes so much sense because the main thing with artists or I guess band members, whatever, people writing songs, writing music is they get really sensitive about it because they're putting themselves out there. So that, yeah, that's a really good way to put that because they are like that.
And I'm not gonna lie, like at first, everybody says you can't mix business with your personal life, but the fact is, Eyeball Records was my life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, to the point where everybody calls me Alex Eyeball, and I don't think like 90% of my good friends even realize how to spell my last name. I'm still Alex Eyeball. I'm in my fucking 40s, and I have this like pseudonym. So it's kind of ridiculous. So at one point, eventually, I just kind of leaned into it, and I was like, "All right, this is my fucking name now, I guess. Like, this is it." Like back when I was a kid, going to shows at CB's and at ABC and all those places, I was Alex from New Jersey. So I think Alex Eyeball was a step up than Alex from New Jersey. When bands come to you and say things like, they want to leave or they're not happy with what's going on or they got a better offer, I can't help but get my feelings hurt a little bit, of course, because like it makes me feel like, oh man, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? And I took those situations and learned from them and was able to learn how to do things better and how to deal with the artist directly a lot better. And it's good like that because we were able to build a community around the Eyeball House because of that, where there would just be people around constantly. It felt like it was like the cleanest punk house you could ever think of. Like everybody cleaned up after themselves, but every day there was at least 20 people walking in and out of that door.
Really?
Yeah, just to hang out. People would come in and help out, stuff envelopes, do mail order, all sorts of stuff. And then we were able to build a really good network like that just by the fact of having the house that everybody can come stay at. And bands that weren't on the label were always staying with us because I just opened my doors up to anybody on the road because I know how hard it is to tour. So we would always feed everybody and do that. So, but to digress, the fact that artists are a different breed, and you really got to watch how you deal with them.
Yeah, I mean, I just know from being in a band of how sensitive. There's a video I found the other day where I was trying to teach a song to one of the guys in the band, and we just blew up at each other.
Oh shit! You have a video of it?
I have a video. Yeah, I put on the Landmeyer Instagram, and I like just start yelling at like. Do you remember Heiner, Rob? He was in Humble Beginnings.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's me and him, and he's trying to just write a part to a song, and I like freak on him, so then he freaks out, and the whole thing just shows that part of it.
How old were you guys when that
Oh
happened?
man, that was like 2008, 2007, I think. So it was like we were like 20. I was like 28, I think, 20, 29.
But you're still an artist, so you're just everybody's sensitive.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you're trying to show something and you think that people aren't really paying attention, and you're like, "What the fuck, man? This is like coming out of my soul." And you're like, "What?"
It's the truth. And that's the way they feel. And if they don't get that reaction, sometimes they get in their own head like they're doing something wrong. So you got to be their cheerleader as well.
Actually, you mentioned the H2O release. Was that the one before they signed to like Epitaph, or was it Epitaph?
All right. So EVR and us have like this kind of funny claim to fame. I claim that we put out the first H2O release. They claim that they put out the first H2O release. I still don't really know in hindsight if ours came out before, if our record was in play before theirs. I can't declare that we were the first label to release H2O, but I later found out that the tracks they gave us for that record, the recording was paid for by fucking Epitaph as a demo to sign them.
Oh, shit.
So I had no idea. So I actually put out a recording that Epitaph paid for. Nobody said anything, and I never had a conversation with Brett over it or anything because it just never came up. And I don't talk to that guy that often, especially over the last few years. Yeah, it turns out that our H2O record were the demos for the record for a record for Epitaph.
Is this the first time that's been like said out loud in an interview?
I think so, because I haven't talked about that record in a really, really long time.
Oh my God. Because I just remember the reason I asked that question is because I remember when they signed to Epitaph and they got so much shit for it.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
like
they
they
did.
were like calling them sellouts and stuff. And that was the record with the Friends Like Family song or whatever they have.
Was that no? That was the Blackout record, I think. Yeah, they caught a lot of heat because of the "Don't forget the struggle, don't forget the streets" type lyrics when they were signing to, like, at the time, a lot of people had beef with Epitaph. Like in the scene, everybody thought it was just too commercialized, and it was. I mean, if you think about it, not too many years prior to that, fucking Offspring on Woodstock, they were doing big stuff, and I understand why people were calling calling them sellouts and everything, but they as people never changed. They've always been the same. Like, I run into Toby still sometimes, and he's same dude. They're all in Rusty. They're all cool still, but I personally think they stuck to their goals and their ethics. At the time, they got a lot of fucking heat.
I think that's how I heard of them because I didn't really know who they were until that whole thing started circulating about this band H2O, and I was like, "Who is this band, and why are they getting so much shit for
The
signing
hype was
Epitaph?"
insane, wasn't it? They had so much hype on them before a record even came out. It was unreal.
How did you compare your label to a major? Meaning, because I know you said later on, you said Warner Brothers bought you guys.
Yeah, we partnered with Warner Brothers. They didn't buy us, but we did an exclusive deal with them.
But prior to that, though, before we jump into that, though, like, how did you see your label being when someone wanted to sign with you, and you're like, "This is why we're a better option than a major."
Mm. Well, because we were hands-on with everything, and quite honestly, the amount of work that we did at Eyeball was way beyond what a record label would normally do. I mean, we were trying to book our bands, we were managing our artists without having a management contract. We weren't double dipping, like we weren't taking any money for doing things that a manager would do for them, but we filled that position constantly because the other artists on the label, the other bands, were my age or younger. A lot of times, I was, even at 23 years old, I was older than some of the artists. So that's kind of like where it was going from.
So because we started talking about the Humble release earlier, because I thought that was a pretty early release for you.
It was. It was like, I could look it up, but I think it was like the 12th or 13th release. It was early. It was really early on, and it was actually the project that created my lifelong friendship with John LeClario, because that's where I first met him.
Oh, that's right, because they used to demo with him, and then they recorded that whole EP at Nada.
Yes, they did.
And so Nada became that. I think for Jersey bands, that opened up our eyes to that recording studio because we had Portrait. Everyone was going to Portrait.
Right, exactly.
I think that basically became the two studios in Jersey.
Absolutely. Yeah, even though John Clario at Nada Studios was in New York, all the Jersey kids went there and a lot of them went there because of that Humble EP.
That record, when I got it in my hands, I put it in, and a couple of the songs we had heard the demos, like After Activate and I think After All was one of the songs. But they had two songs on there that I never heard was 334 and then Jesus Christ, the last song that I always talk about. I have to look that up.
It's a beautiful song.
Oh,
What's it called?
I'm
Uh,
looking it up right now on Spotify. Thank God it's on there. Faith 98.
that's it. Yeah, that's a great, great song. And what a good closing song. Like,
Oh my God.
it's just phenomenal. And they were fucking children when they did that. Josh was like Josh was super intimidated by me back then.
I was gonna bring that up actually.
Were you really?
I was because there was one thing I heard one time from either him or Heiner was like, they was like, dude, Alex is like the scariest fucking motherfucker. Like, just he looks like he can kick your ass. And I remember hearing that. So I remember for years I was always like, dude, this Alex guy apparently was like this scary like guy or something.
Right.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. Was like, was that like something that people thought of you?
Uh, yeah, yes and no.
Oh wow.
Honestly, it depends on who you ask. If you ask the people that were like my age and or older, they would just laugh at that and be like, whatever. Alex is the biggest wuss ever. Like they would just laugh at it. But the younger kids, I came up at a time where like, in hindsight and growing up and becoming an adult, you understand and realize like poor choices you made, growing up. And one of my things was, I grew up in a bad neighborhood and fighting was something that happened quite often. And it was kind of like my go-to. If it had to happen, it had to happen. I wasn't afraid to fight. Sometimes it was the right decision, sometimes it was the wrong decision. I'm not saying that it was always wrong, but because of that, I think, and because of people like Josh helping to create a
Persona.
a story for me,
Yeah.
people started thinking like I was like this big mean asshole or something, like who would like flip out on you or something. It really wasn't like that at all. And I remember finding out that Josh was afraid of me, and I remember going to him, and I don't know if I'm not sure if I got through to him or not, but I said to him, I was like, I apologize. I'm sorry if you freaked out by me. If you are ever, just please tell me if I make you uncomfortable. This is just, I'm kind of gregarious and I'm kind of, out there a bit, and I'm easy to talk to. So if you feel uncomfortable, just tell me. And I tried, but I think I scarred him too much.
Yeah, because he did say that.
I know it's funny. I love that guy too. I have nothing but love for him. I think he's great. But he was like, for some reason, I was like, I'm trying to love you, Josh. Please just take my fucking love, man. And he was like, no, it's too tough. I can't deal with it. Your tough love is just too much for me. He was too, I don't know, scared of it.
Well, Josh is just fucking weird to begin with. I mean,
Yeah, he is.
he's such an oddball.
Yeah, it's part of his charm, though. It's
Totally.
he's definitely out there. And then you have Gabe, who was like obviously not afraid of me, and was the same height as me when he was like 16. Him and I got along really, really well. We would go to shows together all the time. I would pick him up at his mom or his dad's and drive out to shows with him, and we became great friends when he was young. But to get back to that question about if that's the truth about me, somebody referred to me as the Suge Knight of emo once.
As soon as you were saying this, I was like, he sounds like he's like the Suge Knight of like the punk scene. Or like would thought of that way. That's the first thing I
Right.
thought about was Suge Knight.
Someone said that, and you know what? Like, it made me feel terrible to hear that. Like, I was just like, is this what people really think of me? Like, I don't want to be thought of as that guy. Like, I want to stick up for my artists. I want to make sure that they're getting to where they want to be and where they should be. And if I speak loudly sometimes, I mean, I'm Cuban and we talk really loud. I'm from a city where we talk really loud, and I don't really I don't really back then I didn't sugarcoat things as much when dealing with people that were outside of our little community, meaning, the artists that we work with and the people that we hung around with. So I would get very protective of those people because a lot of the times they were younger than me and a little wet behind the ears, even though I was young and I was still wet behind the ears, quite honestly. I felt the need to stick up for people at times. So when I found out that Suge Knight of emo thing, like I laughed, of course, but in the back of my head, I was just like, oh man, I don't want that being what represents me. Like, this has got to change somehow. And I don't think I was ever able to actually change it because that persona just kept going and going. And I did a lot of things that didn't help change it as well in hindsight. But Some of those things were mistakes and some of them weren't.
I was gonna say, like, that must have felt like it's kind of a bummer thing to have people think about you, like, where you're like, I don't want to be known as that. Like, that kind of hurts my feelings a little bit.
Exactly. Like I'm not that kind of person. Like I wouldn't do that to anybody. Like I'm just, I just know what I need to get done. And sometimes people didn't like the way I did it, but I tried, when I heard that, I tried to start being a lot more careful with how I deliver things to people.
How, like, far into the label did you hear that?
How far into the label? Probably around the time where we were having a lot of beef with Victory is when I heard that.
I never heard about this.
It was stupid label rivalry stuff, mostly because of Thursday. The deal was that Thursday were supposed to come back and do another record with us. And Tony created the contract in a way that basically omitted that part of the final contract. So we never got the other record, and then they spent the next couple years trying to get out of Victory. But I never let Tony push us around, and I think that kind of added to that persona of me as being like this tough guy who wouldn't take any shit from anybody.
Well, I mean, I feel like everyone pretty much, there's a lot of talk, I guess, when Victory's brought up, and it's funny because I've interviewed some Victory bands, and they're very humble with their words about not to say anything too negative. But a lot of people outside of that, they've just heard that Victory was like a shit fucking label, and their contracts were fucking awful.
I've heard terrible things about being an artist on Victory. And, I have no problem with Tony Brummel as a person at all. Like, I don't agree with the way that he ran his record label, but that's okay. That's not my business. That's his label. I just don't agree with it. And that's not the kind of label I wanted. But you got to admit, the dude released some incredible pieces of work.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was kind of like what I was thinking. I had a question, which I am going to ask, but it was kind of like a lot of labels they have. Well, I mean, I said it earlier, like a lot of labels they have an ear, and you look at their roster, and you're like, how did you just pick this up? Because they went from, I mean, Victory, we don't have to stand there for like too much, but I mean, they had like Snapcase, and then Strife, Taking Back Sunday, and like then they did like Hawthorne Heights, which I fucking hate that band. I just was like, I don't get it. I don't understand why this band is so big.
I have never listened to one whole Hawthorne song in my life, but I definitely know that they were huge for Victory.
Huge. I mean, it was basically they were that commercial that always came on like Fuse all the time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I was like, I don't get this band sucks. I mean, I could say whatever the fuck I want. But
Yeah, exactly. It's your podcast.
that's right. Which I like feel it's gonna bite me in the ass one day.
The Suge Knight of podcasters, man.
Yeah, right. Damn, Mike's such an asshole.
Yeah, Mike, you really bullied me into this interview, and the Suge Knight podcasters.
Well, what was your did I ask this? Like, what was your criteria? Yeah, what was your criteria for signing a band?
Well, one thing I really didn't want to do was I didn't really want to repeat a sound. There were so many subgenres of genres going on at that time. And there obviously still is, there's kids today have a million subgenres as well. Stuff that like isn't for me, but is for them. And I didn't want to like repeat a sound. So when Taking Back Sunday came to us with their demo, I was like, I already have Thursday here. I don't need Taking Back Sunday. To me, it was, after listening to the demo, it was kind of like just another version of Thursday. So I passed on that. I passed on Brand New too. I passed on a lot of stuff because I didn't want to repeat sounds that ended up blowing up. So what I would do is I tried to keep everything in a way where like it's bands that I personally enjoy listening to and want to work with. And it didn't really matter the genre or sound. I put out this band called The Tiny from Sweden, which is a 3-piece. It sounds like Bjork at times. It's really, really pretty. It's super lovely. It's got like, and they use all this different instrumentation, like a saw and cello, and they're just great. And if anybody out there is into something like a little more mellow, they should definitely check out The Tiny. But the same day I released the Tiny record, I released the first number 12 full length, and we split the ads. The number 12 looks like you and the Tiny. So we would have full page ads, and one said description soft, description quiet, description loud. And the funniest thing was the same kids that were buying the number 12 record were buying that Tiny record. And that's when I kind of realized, like, well, we have a following here that's actually just buying things because we have the label name on it, which was awesome, because that's all I wanted. Because as a kid, you know, there were certain labels that I always bought whatever came out. Like Revelation, I would buy everything that came out on Revelation. Lookout, I would pick up everything that came out on Lookout. So to get to the point where we were one of those labels was just a huge accomplishment for me. So I never wanted to repeat sounds, and I always wanted to keep things a little bit different. So that was basically the criteria of it. And touring, if a band was going to tour. If a band wasn't going to tour, I wasn't going to be able to put our money into it.
Well, that kind of leads to the Humble EP. I just want to stick with that a second, even though I do want to talk about like the Thursday and then Midtown and all that. But with the Humble thing, and you put that out, and everyone grabbed that release because it was so good. And then they go on tour.
The tour of Oblivion?
No, Oblivion happened before they did the release with you, because they did that, and because they put a split 7-inch out with Oblivion. And I think that had the America's Funniest Home Videos cover on it.
That's right. You're right.
It was blue and white. I think I have it. I think I'm looking at it right now. It's like in my stack. When they signed to you, that gave us, like my band, there's a lot of things where other bands were doing stuff. When they signed to you, it was like, oh my God, they got signed to a label. Like, we have to do this too. Then that record comes out, and it was so fucking strong. And then they go on tour, and I think this tour they came back, and that's when they kicked Gabe out. So how did that have an effect on Eyeball?
Well, Gabe was like, I liked all the dudes. Don't get me wrong. I love Jeremy and Chris and Josh and Gabe, obviously. But Gabe was like the direct line to that band. And when Gabe left, our relationship, as far as working relationship between Humble and Eyeball, kind of fell apart. I had nothing against those guys at all. It's their band. If they kick somebody out, they kick somebody out. It was a bummer for us because I really wanted to get behind Humble Beginnings. I really wanted to do that full length with them next, and I really wanted to get them out there. After Gabe left, and Gabe and I were really good friends, it became an issue. So I didn't even try to do anything else after that record with them at that point. I'm still cool with like all of them, obviously, but it didn't feel the same. It wasn't the same working relationship anymore for me. I loved being able to work with Gabe as well, and it threw off the dynamic.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember they basically lost touch with you. Did they try to get more CDs when they ran out?
You know, I don't remember. I can't really picture Josh having the nerve to call me to ask me for them.
That's true.
But I would have given them to him in a second. Absolutely. I would never hold off on them if they want to sell their record. You know what else too? After Gabe left the band, the fact that Josh was like intimidated by me may have been more of the reason why we didn't do anything else afterwards too. Who knows?
Oh, probably. Yeah, Josh wasn't very confrontational. He would just be like,
Yeah, he would literally just go smoke in the corner by himself and like look at the floor.
So you had the first Midtown, the EP, or didn't Pinball put that out?
Yeah, Jay from Pinball put that out first, and then it was out of print for like a few years. So I called Gabe and asked him about it, and then I talked to Rob, and they were all amped. So we released it with new artwork, and I think we remastered it or something. One of those things that doesn't make a huge difference, but for some reason people are curious and they're like, "Oh, it's remastered now." And it probably sounds the same as it fucking sounded before, you dummyhead. But
dummyhead.
But we put that out too, and it did pretty well because that was the first time it actually had like real distribution. We held on to that for a few years until Rob asked if he could do it out with I Surrender. And of course, like I said earlier in our conversation, if a band wants a record back, I'm not going to hold it on them. So I was more than happy to have them do it.
Before you guys signed to Warner Brothers, what was the biggest release you had that you were like, holy shit?
Thursday. The funny thing about the Thursday record was I was homeless when that record came out. I was living in my truck. And
whoa.
Yeah, and Chris from Generation, that was another one. He helped me out to cover the costs for it. We did 1,000 CDs, I think, 1,000 or 2,000 to start. I want to say it was 1,000. We were like, hopefully we'll sell them. And I was literally pulling up to stores with in my truck that I was living out of, like trying to fucking sling CDs to different record shops and stuff, trying to get the name out there for Thursday and working our butts off on it. But it paid off. I think Thursday was probably Thursday and the Casualties. The Casualties just got huge. I mean, whether you like it or not, like that kind of music or not, you gotta understand that the Casualties to this day are one of the biggest big hair punk rock bands, in the world. That's pretty cool that we did well with that in the beginning, being our first release. But as far as the biggest prior to Warner was definitely the Thursday record, because we ended up selling a lot more than that first pressing. And even in that first pressing, we put a suicide prevention hotline in there, but it was a 212 area code, which is New York City's area code, because there wasn't a national line out there yet. And we eventually updated it with the national line once there was one. We updated the cover work.
Wait, why'd you add that on there?
Well, because we wanted to be able to have a national hotline for suicide prevention and not just a local New York number. At the time when we put it out, we were like, well, we're going to sell these in New York and New Jersey anyways, so it'll be helpful for our community to have the phone number for suicide prevention that's at least kind of local to New Jersey and New York.
Oh, that's wild. Did you know they just put out the three digits now? 988 is the new suicide direct line.
Oh, I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that.
It just happened like 2 weeks ago, or it happened very recently.
Oh, cool. That's good to know.
Yeah, I figured I would just kind of say that because I was like, I don't know, maybe you never know who's listening. Like maybe
Hey, if anybody out there's listening and you need that number, call it, man. Please.
that I never even thought about that. You said you were homeless. Like, I don't like to ask. I don't want to put you in uncomfortable conversation if you don't want to talk about it. But
I'm very open with it.
okay, like what happened? Because I know you were talking about you had the house in Kearny.
So that was like late 90s, 99, I think it was. The landlord where I was living out of nowhere was like, I'm selling the house. You have 3 weeks to go. And I had zero money saved because all of my money was going into the label. And I was working my butt off during the day and doing the label at night. So it just through a series of unfortunate events, I lost that house and stored everything at a friend of mine's house and was going to just go on tour for a minute and try to get my bearings. But that didn't work out either. I ended up having to live out of my car and couch surf for like, I don't know, about a year until I got back to normal. It took a while. It had nothing to do with like, it wasn't one of those stories where like I was a drug addict or something. Like I literally just ran into a lot of bad luck at the time and couldn't afford a place on my own because I wasn't making any money.
And you were living in Jersey at this for a year.
Jersey and New York.
It's so cold.
Yeah. Well, in the wintertime, I crashed and would couch surf mostly.
Okay, I was gonna say, man, like those are some brutal winters.
Yeah, but there were times where I was in there in the winter, for sure. Especially like parking in the Lower East Side back when it was still violent and nobody would really bother you if you were
Wow.
parked over. Like nobody would even look at you.
And you're running the label during this whole time?
Yeah, yeah. Me and Vincent Lee.
How are you able to sign? Because I know you talked about the whole that's you put the Thursday album out, but prior to that, like how are you putting? Because I mean, you need money to run this stuff, so how are you doing that?
I never took a dime from the label for the first 6 years.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I didn't touch it. I would work other jobs and at the same time do the label. And I felt like, all right, this is the label's money and this is my money. So it got to the point finally where, turning the money over and reinvesting it got us to a point where we could actually get paid eventually. But I let it go on for a long time to build that nest egg of it so that it could run on its own prior to being able to hire employees, prior to being able to pay myself.
So was the Thursday release the thing that like reignited to you to how am I trying to word this? Did that get you out of like living in your car? Like, did that like boost you to being like, oh, now I could do this?
Yeah, actually it did. That record started doing well. I found the house in Kearny, and from there we had a great 15 years in that same house actually. I had that place until 2015 still.
Wait, so you had you had the house, and then you got kicked out, and then you bought another house there?
No, I rented another house in Kearny.
Why did you stay in that area?
Creature of habit. I like Hudson County. It's multicultural. It's a city, a little bit suburban. It's cool. To me, it was like where I was really comfortable. And it was only a 9-minute drive to Manhattan.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's pretty convenient. Because I say like a lot of people like they started moving to like Hoboken and Jersey City and Weehawken and
Kearny was like the happy medium because we were in between all those towns. So the rent was a little cheaper and a lot cheaper, actually. We ended up building out like the whole third floor of the building. And it was part of we were already leasing that anyways. So we put money into the house, but we lived there for 15 years, so it was completely worth it. We lived and worked out of there for 15 years until we got a different office.
this is a total guess because what was the relationship with Warner Brothers again? They didn't buy you, they partnered with you?
We did a P&D deal. It's basically production and distribution, but it was exclusive.
So was that because of My Chemical Romance?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what happened was after My Chemical Romance, we had every major label coming after us. And, we took meetings with everyone. We didn't take them seriously at all. Like, I had a meeting with the president of Universal. We went out to hire these like day laborer dudes to come in and just drink all the beer at the meeting. And they didn't speak English. We just picked them up from a Home Depot. And we're like, yo, do you guys want to get paid to drink beer today and hang out? And they were like, yeah, man. So like, we didn't take anything seriously. So
Jesus.
we were just fucking clowns. And we were soaking it up because everybody was trying to do stuff with us. So we would just literally be like, all right, well, we'll go out to dinner. And we'd bring like 3 people with us. That didn't even work at Eyeball.
That's amazing.
Warner was the major one that kept coming after us because they wanted that My Chem title. I kind of took the attitude of can't beat them, might as well join them. Right after that, I was supposed to do that Head Automatica record.
Oh, really?
And
The first one?
yeah, that was supposed to come out on Eyeball.
Oh, I love that record.
I do too. I wish it would have came out with us. I love Daryl. I love that band. But fucking Warner kiboshed it on us, and Warner did it. So that was like the beginning. I was like, I don't think this was a good decision because now they're getting involved in us being able to release shit, And of course, they had first option on it because of Glassjaw. They didn't give a shit about Head Automatica until we were trying to put that record out.
I mean, the first thing that popped in my brain when you said you did the deal with them was I felt like Drive Thru's whole deal with MCA would have been a red flag for any other label at that time that was going to play in that same kind of field.
Blackout had an MCA deal too that was pretty crummy. I mean, it's bizarre that a Sheer Terror record came out on MCA, but it did. I should have talked more to other labels that had made that decision that I did, and learn more about it. But at the time, it was kind of like a lifeline because we couldn't keep up with the growth of it all, and we wanted to grow more. And it seemed like that was the best position to be in, was to have a company like Warner Brothers come along that was willing, to pay for our manufacturing, to make sure that we're distributed well. It seemed like the right choice. Going back, I would never have made the choice. It was a good experience for learning, but at the end of it, I wasn't very happy, and I don't think our artists were very happy either, because that's when we had to start signing artists for 4 records, and everything got dirty and weird. When prior to that, I was doing a record at a time because I didn't want to trap anybody to any sort of contract. I don't feel like just because I had the opportunity to do 1 record with you that you're obligated to do every other release with me for the rest of your life. So that kind of caused a little bit of rift internally because I didn't want to do that stuff. I didn't want to be that kind of label. I don't want to be a traditional label. This is still punk rock. But this is where the punk rock and the corporate world kind of coalesce, and you start finding out like this dude who went to college to get this job is now calling the shots on my record label when I created this record label with, still in high school basically. So, it took away all the sincerity of it and all the honesty of it, and it made it more corporate, and it was just a miserable, miserable situation to be in. Like I don't want to tell an 18-year-old dude like or girl like, hey, yeah, we want to work with your record, but you got to sign for 4 records. It's such an awful feeling.
Well, did you like have a conversation with yourself at some point where you're like, okay, I'm stuck in this thing, so either I'm gonna fight it and just be miserable, or I'm just gonna change my whole view and just become this thing that I don't want to be?
Well, I had in the beginning it was awesome. In the beginning everything was great. Obviously, it's that honeymoon period. It didn't get to the point where I wanted to quit or anything like that for quite a few more years. The Warner situation was not the only reason for me to take a break for doing Eyeball, but it was a big part of it. I think I learned a lot with the Warner situation, and I was able to do a lot of things that I normally wouldn't have been able to do because they would fund us with certain scenarios. Like if we needed money for a recording or a video budget, they would come up and cough up the money for us, if we were in a jam. But I didn't like taking their money because I didn't want to be put into a recoup situation with them. I was trying to do everything as wisely as I could. But they weren't the only reason why I stopped doing Eyeball for those years. It just put me in a position that I wasn't happy about. I still worked within those guidelines. It just ideally wasn't what I envisioned for our label. What I envisioned for our label was a place literally where the people who felt insignificant or felt overlooked would have a place to go, either at the Eyeball House just to hang out, which where, it was all different people. It's fans, it was, artists, it was everything would always be around that house, or putting their record out. Like that was my goal. I wanted people that were overlooked or unheard to have a place to be able to create their art, be seen, be noticed, and be successful. And that's a sincere thing. When you have to go and tell an artist you love them and you want to work with them, but you have to sign them for 4 records, it's just an uncomfortable position to be in.
So this is all happening through, you said 2015 is when you dissolved the label the first time?
Yeah, actually, it was earlier than that. 2011 is when I.
Oh, you had the house. You had the house till 2000.
Yeah, I had that house for a long time. Yeah, we're like, I wasn't even living in there, but the rent was so cheap because we had it for so long that we just kept it as a crash pad next to New York City. So like when bands would come through, they would have a place to stay. Even when I wasn't doing the label anymore, I still would put the bands up and everything. So we kept that house, and I didn't even live in it. We just kept that house for people, like a crash pad, literally.
Did you find that like through the 2000, like early 2000s into like 2015, still where you're doing the label and then the label stops, but you're still holding like having bands come and crash? Was there a point where you started getting sick of music at all?
Yeah, there was actually. Not so much sick of music. What I did was like, and I still do this, I go through like this kind of like a cleanse phase every few months where like I'll listen to nothing but old soul music or old school R&B or Louis Jordan and weird shit like that. Like I'll just go all the way back, like, or constant Otis Redding for a month. Shit that like happened way before me that I was never involved in personally, and that I can just listen to as a fan and not be reminded of anything else as far as like the punk rock world.
Interesting.
That's I still always loved music, but I would pay attention to a different genre for a while if I got a little burnt out.
It's almost like for me, anytime I go back to New Jersey, because I live in North Carolina now. But like I don't know if you have this, but this is kind of comparing to you're saying about music. Anytime I go there, I mean, growing up in New Jersey, I lived there for 36 years, and Like I was in LA for like 2 years when I was in my 20s, but everything up there was reminds me of it. So I don't like going there because I also got divorced. So anytime I would go into Morristown, I would remember all this stuff, and I was like, I want to get away and go on vacation, but I don't want to be going to New Jersey because it's just everything there is a fucking reminder of something. So I could feel that with the whole music thing. It's almost like you're kind of like defragging the system a little bit.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I totally get what you're saying about driving through Jersey these days, like, after all these years, because I feel the same way. Like I'll see, like I'll pass a restaurant or something and I'll flash back to like, going there with people or doing things. And sometimes there's really, really great memories in New Jersey. And then there's other times there's some things I just want to forget, kind of. So it gives you like this weird anxiety a little bit, for me at least.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I had like a panic attack last year. Like
Yeah,
for
that's
a
right.
full fucking day. I was like, what the fuck is going on?
That's terrible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was crazy, dude. Because I mean, I just drove. I went to. Do you remember Houston Calls?
Hmm.
So Jarrett has a bagel shop in New Jersey in West Orange, and it's fucking amazing. Yeah, so I stopped by there, and as I was staying in Morristown, I was like, oh, I'll make like a day of it. So I like drove to West Orange, and I'm at West Orange. I went to the old West Orange American Legion before they had torn it down. I'm driving through West Orange, and I'm like, okay, like this is a part I haven't seen. And then as soon as I see the Legion Hall, it's just like a flood of memories. But they were great memories. But then I'm driving to like Montclair, and then it all just starts hitting you.
The nostalgia situation when I hit Jersey is so weird. It's like it's a good feeling and like a bad feeling all at the same time. I can't really explain it. It's just like I think almost an excited anxiety where I'm kind of like, all right, I've already been here most of my life. I'm trying to change a lot of things in my life, so I don't need to really hang out here too much.
Dude, I am 100% there with you. Like that's why I don't live there anymore. I just can't
Me
deal
too. With
with, I
it.
can't deal with it. It's too much, man.
Yeah, I absolutely love New Jersey. I really do, man. I really love New Jersey, but I will never fucking live there again.
Same. 100%, dude. Wow, that's so funny. We're so on the same fucking page. Uh, so okay, so basically we got to the point where the label disperses, but prior to that, I'm seeing on Wikipedia that you did a Gaslight Anthem release. Did you do their first release?
Huh. Well, here's the funny story about
Or
Gaslight.
was it Epitaph?
It was Epitaph's demos.
There we go.
We took Epitaph's demos and we released them. No, what happened with Gaslight was we signed them when they were still called This Charming Man. And I was like, Brian, this is the worst fucking name I've ever heard in my life. You got to change your name. It does not represent your sound at all. Like, this is just not a good name. Brian changed the names of Gaslight Anthem. We signed contracts, whatever. We did press photo shoots. And then while we were recording it with Daniel Goodwin at the clubhouse in Rhinebeck, New York. We recorded for like 5 days. And during that recording session, like everything just kept going wrong. The guitars wouldn't stay in tune. Brian was like really, really focused on using that guitar that would not stay in tune. So we had to like retune after every single take, and it was just so wearing. That whole session was just really, really difficult. And Benny was real unhappy with the studio. He didn't like his drum sound, and I think that they were having like an internal struggle as well, because I know Benny wanted to play, some faster stuff because he's more of a punk rock drummer, more punk rock than Gaslight, obviously. And Gaslight's like a rock and roll band. So we recorded a record, and it didn't come out as well as it should have. So we never released it.
Really?
Yeah, so there's an unreleased Gaslight record.
Does anyone else know? I've never heard that.
Yeah, apparently they re-recorded 3 songs off of it for later releases.
For Sink or Swim.
But no, after that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Jesus.
but as far as those recordings, that session is on a reel somewhere, and that's it. It just never came out. The fact that they were on Eyeball, the reason why they're still listed there is because it followed us all these years later. Because we made the big announcement that we signed them and that we're working, and we posted demos back, in the MySpace days and everything like that to promote them. Everybody thought they were an Eyeball band, and they were for a moment, but that record just did not come out well, and we all decided that it's best to just kind of take a walk from it.
So why didn't you get Sink or Swim?
Um, I just the dynamic of us working together just was not working. I like Brian as a person quite a lot, but uh, as far as being a label and working with him, and probably maybe they didn't like the way we worked either, but we all felt it was better just to just not release this record and let them move on, and that's when they went to side one.
Like when Sink or Swim comes out, and then 59 Sound, and then what was the other one? American Slang.
The American slang, that's it.
So when you're seeing all that happen, what's going on in your head?
Oh, dude. I was so amped for those guys. I was so amped. I remember watching them like opening up for Bruce Springsteen in Hyde Park in London to like, I don't know how many thousands of people. And then having Bruce Springsteen come out during the Gaslight set and singing with him. And I was just like, part of me, to be completely blunt and honest, part of me was like, oh man, I could have been part of that. Like we could have been there with that. And the other part of me was like, I bet if that record came out the way it was and was released, it would have hindered them more than helped them. So in hindsight, I think we made the right decision. But I still felt like, dang, I'm missing out on this awesome shit, and by choice, you know what I mean? But I was really, really happy for them. I was just bummed that we weren't part of it.
It's funny. Like Brian comes up a lot just because he was in my old band for like the last year of when we were
That's right.
together.
Did know that. And so you actually sat down and wrote and played with him. So you know that he likes to do things his own way.
Well, he was on a path. Even in the band, he was he was the second guitarist, and we're like, this is the position. I was like, I'm gonna take over singing all the songs because I've had a couple, and I'll do Chris's, and I'll take voice lessons, and we'll 2.5 step down so I can hit these fucking notes. And we were like a fucking machine. We were so fucking tight, and we go on tour for 2.5 months with Lawrence Arms, which is so long.
Lawrence Arms, you said?
Yeah, with Lawrence Arms, and then the old Wonder Years band, they connected with us for a couple weeks, and we just got so burned out. But like my relationship with Brian is that was the first time he had ever been on tour.
The old Wonder Years, the California one?
The California one, yeah,
Brian and Shane and them?
yeah,
From the Ghost.
and Caitlin and Josh, yeah, and then they did Ghost, and then he does Hanali.
I love those guys.
Yeah, I mean it was cool, but like Brian, he was just a weird fucking dude, and it's funny because when he quit the band, I was like, I'm not doing any more members. So I like him quitting the band was the reason like I left. I was like, I'm not fucking doing this shit anymore. And then years later, when I saw Gaslight come out, I was just like, good for him. And I've never looked at it being like, son of a bitch, that could have been me. Because at that point, I don't even want to fucking play music anymore. I don't give a fuck. But I saw him just blow up. I was like, dude. And every time I see that, I'm like, dude, that's awesome.
It is, right? It's like, it's so fucking cool, man, that kid came from where he came from, and he pulled it off. He did well. And he still is doing well. I mean, I'm talking about it like as if he's not around anymore or something, but he's still busting his butt.
Did you see the reunion they just did at Garwood?
I didn't. I'm assuming there's videos somewhere for it, but I didn't see it. How was it?
It was on YouTube. Basically, he had 3 nights where he was doing a solo show, and for some reason, Garwood, New Jersey or Crossroads in Garwood has become like the club for this shit to happen.
Like even like Popeye from Far Side goes there just to play one show or something.
Midtown just announced that tonight.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, tonight they're playing a show there as the Mermen, but it's Midtown before they do the Mike Hem.
Alf from X number 5 posted something about that recently.
So it's like, I'm looking at your whole roster here, and I'm looking at like Gaslight Anthem, and then there's My Chem and Midtown and things like that. So has any of them coming back? Because I saw your Twitter where you're posting about My Chemical Romance. And you're like, it was 20 something years ago, however long ago it was when you did the release of the Bullets.
20 years old this year.
With them doing that, has that brought any attention back to the label somehow?
It has. It's cool. It's really surprising how many young kids love My Chemical Romance, being a band that's 20 years old. It amazes me because there's really, really young kids. Like I'll see kids here like at Little 5 Points wearing like at 12 years old wearing My Chemical Romance t-shirts. It just like blows my mind. It's pretty interesting. We've definitely been getting a lot of those kids discovering us because of My Chemical Romance. And it's great because then like our current artists like Black Winter Wells or Nate No Face are getting those kids attention as well. So it's working out for us in our favor. Since they announced that tour, it seems like everybody's writing a book or an article on something, and it's about My Chemical Romance. So like, it got to the point where I would get contacted for interviews, and I'd be like, "Is this interview just about My Chemical Romance?" And they'd say yes, and I'd say, "I'm not going to do that. That's their story to tell, and it's not mine." But I like that their fans are discovering our newer artists, and they're also discovering our old artists too, because not everyone was huge, but there are a lot of good records that were under there. I had a conversation just recently with a kid who must have been like, I don't know, 16 years old, and it was at a show here in Atlanta that one of our new artists, Black Winter Wells, was playing last week, and he was like, "Yo, I have brothers that are 2 decades older than me who grew up listening to like Thursday, and can I take a picture with you and send it to them?" And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I was like, "I'm surprised you even know about it." And he's like, growing up, it's all, I would hear all these things from my brothers. He was like, "Your label created all this music that my brothers grew up on, and those are the guys that influenced me." So that's pretty neat, It's a cool feeling.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. And I can imagine too that there's these kids when they're going to your website, because I'm on your website right now, and if you go to the store, like you have a lot of cassette tapes there. So it seems like if I was a younger kid going there, cassette tapes are what younger kids are buying these days, which is so weird. So I'd be like, I feel like that would be totally working in your favor because they're like, oh, wait a minute, I could totally buy these.
Well, the cassette thing is interesting you brought that up because what we're doing with that is it's a straight up, what we do is a pre-order bundle of a t-shirt and a cassette, and it's exclusive. It's only for that pre-order window. So it's like 2 weeks usually. And then we close the pre-order window. Cassettes, knock on wood, right now still turn over pretty quickly as far as manufacturing. We print all of our t-shirts direct to garment. So as immediately as the order comes in, the t-shirts are made. But those bundle artists is how we refer to them. And that's a non-exclusive license. It's us basically teaming up with that artist, creating a bundle for them to release through us. And after that's done, we have no rights to that release at all anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So basically, we're just teaming up with artists, doing these bundles of t-shirts and cassettes, helping get their name out more.
So is that kind of like to your point of the philanthropy part of the label?
Yeah, exactly. We're if we cover our costs, then we're happy.
What do you do? I'm gonna wrap this up shortly, but what do you do now? Like, what's your career? What's your job?
Oh, I actually I run a prop house here in Atlanta.
What's that?
It's props for film and television. So like basically like if someone wants to film a scene in a morgue, they'll contact us and be like, "Do you have a morgue set up?" And we're like, "Yeah, we do," and they rent it for their production.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
So like I'll get weird requests because what we do, like the name of the company is Obscure Props. We specialize in like really strange things and more extreme things. So we have the biggest collection of crazy shit in Atlanta. We do a lot of horror movies, and then we do like weird TV series. Like the other day, Black Mafia season 2 rented a hyena from us. Like weird shit like that,
That's so weird.
Yeah. But it's cool as shit. Like, and honestly, it's not much different than running a record label. It's still the entertainment industry. You're still dealing with artists. You're still dealing with people. And, some all my experiences with the record label kind of helped out with this position where I am now.
Well, cool, man. So before I wrap it up, the last two questions, I started asking this recently. Is there any story that you've always wanted to tell and you never got a chance to, and now you can?
I never told that Gaslight story before.
I was thinking, I was like, I think you did a couple of those, especially with the Victor or with the Thursday and the.
Oh, coming back to do another record. Yeah, that stunk. Not off the top of my head, not to sound uninteresting, but yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I'm glad that people will know more about the Gaslight Anthem situation and how that worked out. I can't think of any real stories besides, passing on bands that blew up, which is hilarious to me.
What, Take Back Sunday and Brand New?
Yeah, that's just two of them. There's more.
I can imagine though, man. I mean, the entire history of doing that, you know that. I mean, there was probably demos that crossed your path that you didn't even get a chance to listen to, and they probably became some big thing.
Saves the Day did that to me. I got their demo the day after EVR, and I was like, oh, I really want to do this. Gabe, set it up for me. Help me out. And they signed Equal Vision.
What was that for? Can't Slow Down or Through Being Cool?
Can't slow down. I really, really wanted that record so bad. I love Saves the Day.
See, that's the story. That's another really good one.
That's the story. So yeah, I guess that's it then.
Nothing else interesting.
Yeah, I did it for 20 something years, but they have no interesting stories. Jeez.
It's kind of a question that really someone asked me one time. They're like, "Oh, I wish you would have let me know you're gonna ask that because I could have thought about it." So I didn't realize like how on the spot it puts somebody because usually someone will be like, "Oh, well, this thing," and it's such a. I'm like, "Wow, that is such an interesting story." It's hard to be put on the spot and be like, "Oh, this."
It is, dude. It is. And one thing I just remembered something that kind of relates to what we were talking about earlier about how Josh was intimidated by me and how like other people seem to have been. I wanted to make sure that like people don't think that about me. Like I don't want them to think that like I was just some tough guy who was starting trouble and being a jerk for no reason. That's like it bothers me.
I think just people hearing that will hopefully set that.
Yeah, I hope so. Because like, yeah, I'm easy to talk to. I'm easily found as well. So,
I mean, I've been scared this whole time, so I'm just kidding.
oh yeah, sure you were. If we were, that's why we're doing this over voice Skype and not video because you can't even see me. You're scared.
That's right. I'm so intimidated.
Yeah, exactly. Well, dude, it's been awesome talking to you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't think we ever met back in
No,
the day.
I don't think so either. I know that you and I have a lot of friends in common, but I don't think we've ever. We've definitely been in the same room at the same time, but I don't think we've ever met actually.
Eyeballs come up a lot in this podcast, just remembering bands and stories and stuff.
That makes me happy.
And because I remembered the whole thing with Josh being intimidated, and I was like, I don't think I ever met this guy because I'm wondering why he thought that because I don't know what he looks like. I think I was like trying to Google like what you looked like because it's almost like Tony Bromo. Bromo, is that how you say his name? Victory?
Brummel.
Brummel. Um,
Yeah.
I always heard about him, and he was like an intimidating dude and stuff. So I was like, I wonder what he looks like, because they usually record labels, the people who own it, their faces usually aren't really out there. Except I remember the Jade Tree guys were always. I remember their faces just because I think that like AP did an article on them years ago. But you usually don't know the behind the scenes what they look like. So it's like I was like, I wonder what this dude looks like. Because he sounded like he was like, people were, Josh was intimidated. I was like, why was he intimidated? I was like, well, Josh was intimidated by fucking everything. So
Yeah, exactly.
it's such a weird character. I love that guy. Well, cool, dude. So last two questions. Before I ask the last one, what would you like to plug? It could be about you. It could be about a friend. It could be about both.
Well, I'd love to plug the new Black Winter Wells record that Eyeball just released called Crystal Shards. We released a record with this artist named Nate No Face. He spells it N and then the number 8, No Face. We did a full length last year with him, and we have another release coming out in October with him. So those are the two, major focuses right now at Eyeball, the two artists. I only want to take on like 4 artists a year because that's plenty of work.
How is it different now? Actually, I just thought of this. Like, how is it different? How is it different doing a band's release or running? I don't say running a band, like having a band on your label now than back in the day.
Oh man, it's a huge difference because a lot of these kids record at home. A lot of them can do these things on their own. They can go through DistroKid just to get digital distribution. They can promote themselves through their IG, through their Twitter, through their TikTok. They have all the tools in front of them. So for a label to get involved, we have to offer something absolutely special to that artist. Otherwise, there's no reason for us to be involved. They already can do it. The difference now is Not only the fact that like we're trying to mentor more and show them the ways to do certain things, but we also are able to go back to the way we used to do things where we don't have to sign a band for more than one release. I'm really happy about that. And now, not only that, we don't keep the recording copyrights. We don't own any rights at all to anything we're releasing. We do a licensing deal with the artist for 8 years usually. At the end of the 8 years, everything, all ownership will revert back to that artist. So basically, we're renting the release from them, and we don't keep it. And that's another thing we weren't able to do with Eyeball back then. We can let things go as soon as we want, because when we were under Warner, we were stuck to those contracts of, 4 releases. So now we get to do things we want. They have a non-exclusive contract, and they get a full staff of people because we have in-house art design, we have in-house promotion, we have in-house everything, just people trying to help out. So it's pretty cool.
Do you still own the rights to the first My Chem release that you did?
No, I gave it back to them.
Wow.
Yeah, dude.
God damn.
Yeah, that was a really tough decision for everyone, but it just makes the most sense. My Chemical Romance is one of the biggest rock bands in the world. That was their first record, and we got lucky to do it. And I produced half of it. Jeff from Thursday produced half of it. We were really all hands-on with it. The Eyeball logo is on 3 Cheers as well, but Warner was the releaser of it. But it got to the point where I was like, we can't hold these things. We got to get some stuff back to people. So it just made the most sense to me ethically for them to have everything.
Wow. That's huge. That's so.
Yeah,
Wow.
I walked away from a lot of dough potential, but that's okay because I value my friendship with the My Chem guys more than I value making money off of my friends. Now I have a job, I make my living, and I do Eyeball, but I'm not relying on Eyeball to live. So there's no reason to hold anybody's shit back. I gave Murder by Death all their records back too.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean,
And
I guess that kind of helps answer this last question, but you were about to say something.
I was gonna say I ran into I didn't run into him. I went to see Murder by Death in New York last year up in Woodstock, and it was just like an amazing reunion, like of hanging out with everybody. But I don't think I'd be able to do those sort of things, be able to have those sort of friendships still, if I didn't do the right thing by giving them their record rights back.
See, I think that alone right there should clear up anything where someone like, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but with like the whole like intimidating thing, it's like, I hope people listen to that and be like, wow, we were so wrong.
Yeah. He's not that bad. He's not stealing people's records from them for the rest of their lives,
Yeah.
like every other label. I don't want to be every other label. I think it's just so antiquated. I felt it was antiquated 15 years ago. I felt the music industry or record label industry was antiquated. So now it absolutely is. And I hear horror stories of kids coming to us and messaging us about like, I signed to Atlantic, but I signed 2 years ago and my record's still not out and they won't let me put any singles out. And it's just like, well, what did you expect, dude? You signed your life away. You don't do that. And that's what I'm trying to do now with Eyeballs. I'm trying to get to those kids before they make a decision like that that's going to change their career and possibly hurt them.
Jesus. Wow.
I don't have like a vendetta against major labels or anything like that. I just choose not to work with them, and I don't think anybody else should.
Well, it's more like the wow is that a label would just do that. And I think I've heard a couple times where, I'm sure it happens a lot, where they'd have the record and they just shelve it.
It's happening to kids constantly because the major labels don't know how to tap into this demographic of like 16 to 22. They have no idea. Nobody does. It's a very, very mysterious demographic. It's a weird age right now. We're at a weird time. Kids need a lot of help, man. People, my peers' children are fucked up. Like, we did not do a good job raising them. They have problems and they need help. So that's why I'm glad we're able to do Eyeball the way we do it now in this fashion, just to be able to help them.
Well, actually, so I think this will easily help you answer this last question. So what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
What scene ethics? Okay. Um, well, we still try to do everything in house. We still try to do everything DIY, you know. Um, as far as scene ethics, I don't really know exactly what you mean by that.
It kind of means like when you went to shows and by going there and meeting friends and stuff, you kind of learned this thing you didn't get in high school or college. So it's like by going to shows, I mean, a lot of people say DIY or they're like, just don't be a fucking asshole and pick people up, things like that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah. The things that don't even need to be said, but um, yeah, I just really want to help grow this next community of artists and their scene. And even though I'm not part of that scene and I'm older than them, I want them to have the chance to have I want them to have the chance that we all had when we were younger, because we were really fucking lucky to be where we were in New Jersey, all of us. Like that time was just so magical. And it's going to happen again with the newer and younger kids. It's just going to take a little while, and I think they need a little bit of help, and I want to help.